The house of mirrors that we call Hollywood has always been a place of beautiful illusions where the flickering light of a projector transforms ordinary women into immortal goddesses. We remember them as they were in their prime, wrapped in mink, bathed in the soft focus of a Technicolor lens, their smiles frozen in a state of eternal grace. But behind the silver screen, away from the demanding gaze of the studio executives and the relentless hunger of the press, these women were more than just icons. They were mothers. They were the anchors of dynasties that the public only caught glimpses of through the grainy pages of fan magazines or the occasional carefully staged photograph. To the world, they were Audrey, Elizabeth, and Grace. To their sons, they were something far more complex, a source of inspiration, a shadow of immense proportions, and a legacy that could either be a golden key or a heavy burden to carry. Welcome to Golden Star Memories, where today we begin an intimate journey into the lives of the men who grew up in the orbit of the most famous women in the world. Consider the grace of Audrey Hepburn, the woman who defined elegance for an entire century. Behind that gamine smile and the iconic silhouette of breakfast at Tiffany's was a mother who fiercely protected her domestic peace. Her sons, Sean Hepburn Farrah and Luca Dotti, did not just inherit her features. They inherited a responsibility to a memory that the world refuses to let go. Then there is the sheer, overwhelming magnetism of Elizabeth Taylor, the violet-eyed queen of the cinema. Her eldest son, Michael Wilding Jr., was born into a world where his mother's every romance and every tragedy was a global headline. These were children of the palace, raised in the presence of royalty, sometimes literal, as in the case of Albert II, the Prince of Monaco. His mother, the ethereal Grace Kelly, walked away from the peak of Hollywood fame to wear a crown, leaving behind a cinematic ghost that her son would spend a lifetime honoring. As we step back into this world of velvet curtains and hidden corridors, we begin to see the cracks in the porcelain. For every moment of triumph on the Academy Awards stage, there was a quiet evening at home where these legends wrestled with the cost of their fame. They were women who commanded the screen, but often found themselves at the mercy of a ruthless industry that demanded they remain perfect, even as they navigated the messy, beautiful reality of raising sons in the spotlight. There is a certain melancholy in these stories, a sense of nostalgia for a time when stardom felt like a divine right. Yet the humanity of these families reminds us that even the brightest stars are tethered to the earth by the love and the legacy of their children. We are only beginning to scratch the surface of these intricate lives, peeling back the layers of glamour to find the heart beating underneath, where the next generation waits to step out from the wings, carrying names that carry the weight of history itself. The ascent to the heights of Hollywood stardom was never merely a journey. It was a transformation, an alchemy, that turned private dreams into public property. In the golden years of the industry, a woman's face was her fortune, and her life was a script written by the studios. For a legend like Sophia Loren, the path to international acclaim was paved with the grit of her early life in Italy and the ultimate triumph of her Oscar-winning performances. She was the timeless icon of international cinema, a woman whose beauty and elegance were matched only by her formidable talent. Yet, inside the grand villas and beyond the flashbulbs of the paparazzi, she was cultivating a world for her sons that was far more meaningful than any film set. Her younger son, Edoardo Ponti, grew up in the presence of this overwhelming majesty. He didn't just see a movie star, he saw a master of the craft. Now 53, Edoardo has spent his life both honoring and expanding that legacy, moving from the front of the lens to the director's chair. He chose to tell stories from behind the camera, using the lessons of emotional depth and narrative power he learned at his mother's side to create his own respected career. It is a transition from being the subject of the art to being its creator, a path that many sons of the great sirens have walked with a mixture of reverence and quiet ambition. As the 50s gave way to the experimental fervor of the 70s, the definition of a Hollywood legend began to shift. We saw the rise of women like Susan Sarandon and Goldie Hawn, actresses who brought a new kind of vitality to the screen. Sarandon, the fierce star of Dead Man Walking and Thelma, and Louise built a reputation on her unflinching independence and intellectual depth. Her son Miles Robbins, now 33, reflects that same spirit of creative defiance. Growing up in a household where the arts were a way of life, Miles found his own voice through music and acting. developing a style that is distinctly contemporary yet rooted in the fearless authenticity his mother championed. Then there was Goldie Hawn, the radiant comedy icon whose performance in Private Benjamin made her a household name. Her eldest son, Oliver Hudson, inherited that effortless screen charm and playful energy. Now 49, Oliver has carved out a successful space in television and entertainment, proving that the comedic timing and warmth that made Goldie a star are indeed hereditary traits, though he has shaped them into a career that stands on its own merit. But behind the scenes, the intrigues of fame often required a delicate balancing act. Sharon Stone, who became a global sensation through her role in Basic Instinct, had to navigate a level of scrutiny that few could imagine. Her eldest son, Rowan Joseph Bronstein, was raised in the wake of that storm. At 25, Rowan's life is a study in the choice of privacy over the roar of the crowd. He represents a generation of Hollywood children who saw the cost of the spotlight and chose a quieter, more grounded existence, influenced by his mother's creativity but shielded from the harsher edges of her fame. Similarly, Diane Keaton, the beloved star of Annie Hall, managed to maintain a sense of mystery and individuality that defied the standard Hollywood mold. Her adopted son, Duke Keaton, was raised in an environment shaped by art and design, far from the typical Hollywood parties. Now 26, Duke lives a private life that mirrors his mother's unconventional spirit, showing that the most enduring legacies are often those built on the values taught behind closed doors rather than the characters played on screen. The allure of the cinematic's past is often found in its contradictions, the brilliance of the performance versus the hidden pain of the performer. Tilda Swinton, with her Oscar-winning role in Michael Clayton, has always been a figure of mysterious presence and fearless range. Her son, Xavier Swinton Byrne, grew up in a household where film and visual art were the primary languages spoken. Now 28, Xavier's own entry into the world of acting is marked by the same quiet intensity and originality that defines his mother's work. In Europe, the legend of Catherine Deneuve, the timeless star of Belle de Jour, remains one of the most respected in film history. Her eldest son, Christian Vadim, followed both his mother and father into the world of acting, building a career in French cinema that honors the distinguished artistic heritage of his family. For these men, the golden years of their mothers' careers were not just historical facts, but the very atmosphere they breathed, a world of scripts, rehearsals, and the constant, invisible pressure to live up to a name that the entire world knew. Consider the immense weight of the Taylor Wilding lineage. Elizabeth Taylor, the unforgettable star of Cleopatra, was perhaps the ultimate manifestation of Hollywood's grandest era. Her eldest son, Michael Wilding Jr., was born into a whirlwind of glamour and drama that defined the 20th century. Now 73, Michael's journey through the entertainment world and his exploration of visual arts like sculpture represent a long-term engagement with the legacy of a mother who was larger than life itself. These sons were the silent witnesses to the first difficulties their mothers faced. The struggle to remain relevant in an industry that prizes youth, the fight for roles that matched their intellect, and the constant battle to protect their families from a media landscape that grew more intrusive with every passing decade. The facade was always perfect, the gowns, the hair, the scripted interviews, but the reality was a complex web of behind-the-scenes intrigues. Mothers like Melanie Griffith, the star of Working Girl, and Vanessa Redgrave, the acclaimed force behind Julia, had to fight for their place in a changing industry. Melanie's son, Alexander Bauer, and Vanessa's son, Carlo Gabriel Nero, both grew up seeing the labor behind the legend. At 40 and 56 respectively, they have each found their own way to remain connected to the film world through independent projects and storytelling, honoring the extraordinary artistic heritage of their mothers while navigating their own creative paths. This was the hidden drama of the Golden Stars, the effort required to make the impossible look easy, and the quiet resilience they passed on to the sons who watched from the wings, waiting for their own moment to define what it means to be part of a Hollywood dynasty. As the neon glow of the 70s faded into the sharp, unforgiving glare of the 80s and 90s, the thin veil of Hollywood protection began to unravel. For decades, the major studios had functioned like a fortress, keeping the private agonies of their stars hidden behind high walls and ironclad contracts. But as a new era dawned, the world became more voyeuristic, and the sons of the legends found themselves caught in the crossfire of public adoration and private tragedy. This is where the story shifts from the dream to the reality, where we see that even the most celebrated bloodlines were not immune to the shadows. Perhaps no story embodies this heartbreak more than that of Farrah Fawcett, the dazzling blonde icon of Charlie's Angels. She was the face that launched 1,000,000 posters, a symbol of effortless California sunshine. But behind that radiant smile was a mother grappling with the ultimate nightmare. Her only son, Redmond O'Neill, born from her tumultuous relationship with Ryan O'Neill, would become the subject of a very different kind of headline. While the world watched Farrah's brave and public battle with cancer in her final years, it also watched the agonizing struggle of her son. Redmond spent years trapped in a cycle of addiction and legal troubles, a journey that unfolded under the merciless gaze of the tabloid press. The silence that once protected the stars had been replaced by a megaphone, and the tragedy of a mother seeing her child struggle while she faced her own mortality became one of the most poignant dramas of the modern era. It was a turning point that reminded the public that even a goddess of the small screen could not shield her family from the harsh realities of the human condition. In this same landscape of shifting truths, Mia Farrow, the haunting star of Rosemary's Baby, found herself at the center of one of the most enduring scandals in cinematic history. For years, the complexities of her private life and her relationship with Woody Allen were whispered about in the corridors of power. But the full weight of the drama would eventually fall on the shoulders of her youngest son, Ronan Farrow. Rather than seeking the refuge of the family business in acting, Ronan chose a path that seemed almost like a reaction to the secrets of his upbringing. He became a force in investigative journalism, a man dedicated to tearing down the very walls of silence that had once defined the industry his mother helped shape. His career, marked by a relentless pursuit of accountability and truth, was forged in the fires of a childhood where the lines between the personal and the public were perpetually blurred. It was a stunning transformation, the son of a Hollywood legend, becoming the man who would eventually help dismantle the culture of complicity that had allowed powerful men to operate in the shadows for generations. The struggle for identity often took a different, more internal form for those born into the shadow of giants. Consider the journey of Chaz Bono, the son of Cher, the fearless icon of music and film. Growing up as the child of a woman who built a legacy on reinvention and individuality, Chaz faced his own journey of transition and self-discovery in the most public way possible. The drama here was not one of scandal in the traditional sense, but a profound and public evolution of the self. While the world knew his mother as an indestructible force of nature, Chaz had to find the strength to advocate for his own truth, eventually becoming a respected author and public advocate. His resilience reflects the same fighting spirit that defined Cher's career. But his path required a different kind of courage, the courage to change the narrative that had been written for him since birth. Similarly, Navarone Garibaldi, the younger son of Priscilla Presley, had to navigate the immense cultural weight of the Presley name. While the world still obsesses over the king of rock and roll, Navarone chose a more alternative edge, finding his voice through music that stood in stark contrast to the polished image of his family's past. It was a quiet rebellion against the expectations of a legacy that can often feel like a museum, choosing instead to live a life that is raw, modern, and entirely his own. Sometimes the greatest drama was the act of disappearance itself. For Brigitte Bardot, the unforgettable French symbol of beauty and sensuality, the pressure of fame became so stifling that she famously retreated from the world. Her only son, Nicolas Jacques Charrier, was born into a storm of international obsession, yet he chose a life that was the polar opposite of his mother's. He sought a far more private existence, moving away from the cameras and the relentless demands of the Bardot name. This was a choice that society often struggled to understand. Why would the child of such a legend walk away from the throne? The answer lay in the hidden cost of being a symbol. Behind closed doors, these mothers and sons had to negotiate the terms of their own lives, often choosing to distance themselves from the industry that had both enriched and exploited them. Even for a star like Nicole Kidman, whose life has been a whirlwind of Oscar-winning performances and high-profile relationships, her son Connor Cruz has chosen a path centered around private interests and a life largely outside the intense spotlight. It is a quiet form of sovereignty, a way of reclaiming a life that the world feels it has a right to witness. The story of the Hollywood son is often one of reconciling the public icon with the private parent. When we look at the life of Lucille Ball, the beloved queen of television comedy, we see a woman who pioneered the very concept of the sitcom. But for her only son, Desi Arnaz Jr., the experience of being born into the most famous family in America was a heavy mantle. Rising to fame as a teen idol, he lived through the peak of the family's influence before eventually stepping into a much quieter life. The studios of the past would have wanted the story to continue indefinitely, a perpetual loop of I Love Lucy, but the reality of a son's life is never so simple. These men were the ones who saw the exhaustion behind the humor, the intelligence behind the beauty, and the profound loneliness that can often accompany a life lived in the public eye. They were the ones who lived through the scandals that were whispered about in hushed tones at the Polo Lounge, and they are the ones who ultimately decided which parts of the legacy were worth keeping and which parts had to be left behind in the fading light of the silver screen. The final act of any great Hollywood story is not the moment the credits roll, but the legacy that remains when the lights in the theater have finally gone up. As we look at the landscape of modern entertainment, we see that the seeds planted by the titans of the 20th century have grown into a diverse and sprawling forest. The inheritance of these sons is not merely a collection of trust funds or famous surnames. It is an intrinsic understanding of the power of storytelling and the heavy responsibility of public perception. For some, like Jack Quaid, the son of America's romantic comedy queen Meg Ryan, the legacy is one of revitalization. Growing up with the infectious charm of Sleepless in Seattle and When Harry Met Sally as his backdrop, Jack has managed to translate that family spark into a career that feels entirely fresh and contemporary. At 33, he has stepped out of the shadow of his mother's girl next door archetype to become a versatile actor in his own right, proving that while the industry has changed since the 90s, the demand for genuine talent remains the same. He represents the successful fusion of a legendary past with an ambitious future, carrying the torch into an era of streaming giants and cinematic universes without losing the grounded humanity that made his mother a beloved household name. In contrast, there are those who have chosen to honor their mothers by stepping away from the proscenium entirely, finding fulfillment in the quiet corners of life that their parents were often denied. Justin Qualley, the eldest son of the elegant Andy McDowell, has opted for a path far from the flashbulbs that once followed his mother during the days of Groundhog Day and 4 weddings and a funeral. At 40, his focus on business and family life serves as a silent tribute to the grounded values McDowell sought to instill in her children despite her status as an international beauty icon. Similarly, Kyle Johnson, the son of the groundbreaking Nichelle Nichols, serves as a living connection to a legacy that changed the cultural fabric of the world. While his mother was breaking barriers on the bridge of the Starship Enterprise and inspiring generations at NASA, Kyle was observing the grace and resilience required to be a pioneer. Now 74, he maintains a quiet existence that honors the memory of a woman who was more than just a star. She was a symbol of hope. This choice to live simply is perhaps the ultimate luxury for a child of Hollywood, a way of reclaiming the privacy that fame so often consumes. The legacy of the greats also lives on through those who have taken up the mantle behind the camera, shaping the narratives of the next generation. We see this in the work of Eli Craig, the son of the incomparable Sally Field. Having watched his mother navigate the emotional depths of Steel Magnolias and the grit of Norma Ray, Eli chose to build his own world through writing and directing. At 53, he uses the humor and imaginative storytelling that seems to run in the family to create films that are uniquely his. His brother, Sam Griesman, has taken a more modern approach, using his wit and social media presence to share the warm, often humorous reality of life with an Oscar-winning mother. This dual legacy, one of professional craftsmanship and the other of intimate familial affection, paints a complete picture of Sally Field's impact. It is a reminder that the mark left by a star is not just on the screen, but in the character of the men they raised. For the sons of the truly transcendent legends, women like Barbara Streisand and Meryl Streep. The inheritance is one of pure artistic excellence. Barbara's only son, Jason Gould, inherited a gift that many would consider a heavy burden, a voice of remarkable depth and emotion. Rather than attempting to compete with his mother's legendary status, Jason has found a way to use his music as a bridge, even performing alongside her, in a way that feels like a sacred passing of the baton. At 59, his career is a testament to the idea that talent is not a competition, but a shared language. Then there is Henry Wolff, the son of Meryl Streep. Growing up in the home of arguably the greatest actress of her generation, Henry found his own rhythm in the world of songwriting and music. At 46, his intimate performances and thoughtful storytelling mirror the same dedication to craft that defines his mother's career in classics like Sophie's Choice and The Devil Wears Prada. These men have found a way to be artists in the truest sense, protected by the wisdom of mothers who knew that fame is fleeting but art is eternal. As we reflect on the final years of these icons, we see how their sons became the ultimate stewards of their history. The sons of Audrey Hepburn, Sean Hepburn Ferrer, and Luca Dotti have spent decades ensuring that their mother's humanitarian spirit and timeless grace are never forgotten. Through foundations, books, and archival projects, they have transformed their personal grief into a global celebration of Audrey's life. Likewise, the sons of Lauren Bacall, Stephen Humphrey Bogart, and Sam Robards continue to preserve the memory of an era when Hollywood was defined by sophistication and sharp wit. Stephen, now 77, and Sam, now 64, carry the dual weight of two legendary parents, yet they do so with a steady, thoughtful commitment to the truth of their family's journey. Even in the world of modern pop culture, we see this stewardship in Brandon Thomas Lee, who helps manage the legacy of his mother, Pamela Anderson, by stepping into the world of fashion and production with a confidence that mirrors her own. The mark these women left on history is indelible. But it is through their sons that the story remains human. Whether it is Prince Albert II leading Monaco with the poise he learned from Grace Kelly, or Toby Stephens commanding the stage with the same brilliance that defined Maggie Smith's legendary career, the influence of these mothers is a living, breathing thing. They taught their sons how to navigate a world that would always see them through the lens of someone else's fame. In the end, the greatest achievement of these Hollywood mothers was not the awards they won or the films they made, but the men they left behind. Men who have found the courage to be themselves while carrying names that will live forever in the annals of cinema. The glamour may fade and the studios may crumble, but the bond between these mothers and their sons remains the one true story that Hollywood could never quite script.